Welcome, sisters who are able to join or even watch on the replay. I'm going to see who's here. Maybe I'll tune in on my phone. If you're listening, just put an emoji, or if you're watching the replay, hashtag replay, put an emoji. Oh yeah, here we go. Oh, let's take a deep breath together. Take a nice inhale. And then exhale. Let it all go. I'm really here popping on just so that we can experience a sense of togetherness and community. And this may take days as the ripple effect as people come back to social media from whatever process they're in today. Today is the day right after the election. And I first want to just start off with an honoring of two things: what you're feeling, no matter who you are, what it is you're feeling. And then let's honor what's so. And we're going to talk a little more about that. I'm not really here to offer platitudes or, or spiritualize this, but I have some real thoughts about how we can meet this moment. And whenever you're ready, you get to listen to that if you choose to. Let me just tune in and see who else is here. So I just had a Creators Academy meeting, and some people showed up in a lot of grieving, a lot of sadness. And so if that's you today, or the day that you're listening to this, or you're listening to it later, but remembering this day, I think it's legit and it's absolutely necessary to experience what it is we're experiencing. I think that we know that by now. In our spiritual growth, we have come to acknowledge and embrace our embodiment, our humanity. Some people talked about feeling sick, having vertigo, crying. And so let it come out. Let yourself rage out, let yourself cry, let yourself move the energy. There's a lot of tension and expectation. And there were some beautiful, glorious things. And we created in our mind a world called what it would be like. What it would be like if this candidate, what it would be like if that candidate. And so wherever you are in whatever country, you might be having an election at some point, and this might support and serve. And I know the ripple effect of what happens here is felt throughout the world. So just acknowledging all of that as we dive into this tender moment and also incredible opportunity. And I say that not to move us out of the moment, but I'm here and I'm going to use words. And so I would, if I were with you and you were crying, I would just hold your hand and we would be together in presence. There's something really beautiful about being with whatever it is, being with the inner parts of yourself. As Claire Dash teaches, she's our trauma therapist inside the Evolving Sisters Network membership and leader inside the Evolving Sisters Network. And her parts work has supported me in so much of what I do and how I show up. And I feel like it's what I can attribute so much of my healing to. So let's not bypass those parts that are not happy here, the parts that had expectations, the parts that had a dream, the parts that feel for other people, the parts that imagine what it would be like for different types of people or themselves. There's so many conversations happening in the field that my intention here is to point us toward the genius of our own bodies and the parts work, the relationship that we get to develop with ourselves, and then to point us in a way forward that will be the future conversation that we have from here on out. At least that's the one I'm going to be having from here on out. Because I believe that we're here as leaders. I believe that we signed up for this. That's the context that I choose for my embodiment on earth. We all get to choose our context. I can't prove if something's right or wrong, but I can lean into a context that gives me power, that gives me meaning of why I'm here. And so today is also a reminder that your purpose and your gifts, they haven't changed. They maybe even got magnified. And we're going to talk about that too, because there's something really interesting that's taking place in the field. And that's more of my come from place. And I'll share that in transparency, my come from place today is pretty neutral. And that might not work for some, and that might work for some others. And you might have views of how did she get to neutral? Did she vote for the person who's now in office or will be in office in January? And I'll say, I did not. It doesn't matter if I did or didn't, but I did not. I imagined a world where a woman with so much joy and exuberance. And that was what I was really attracted to. And a woman of color would be the president of the United States. And I also tracked conversations in my community, in my bubble of Facebook, where I knew that another outcome was highly likely. But there's not anything in me in this moment that's making up a story about right or wrong. And the reason why I'm probably at that place is because I think I've lived at least long enough on this planet to know that I really don't know, that there's so much I don't know, and that I've seen, and I've done videos on this in my YouTube channel, I have seen how beliefs hijack us. And so I walk this line of having a preference and voicing the preference and making stands, and also not knowing at the same time. That's just the yoga that I personally have been engaged in. And I find that it leads to a lot more inner peace. Some of you know my background. I grew up in a very religious, like fundamentalist Christian family. I went to a Christian college and I went to a Catholic law school. So I was steeped in religion. I've done medicine plant journeys, and I've sat at the feet of Hindu teachers, spiritual Hindu teachers, Sufi teachers, and Buddhist teachers, and early century Christian teachers. So I'm a bit of a mystic and a spiritualist in my heart, and believe that all of us are pointing to God. But in my background, as I started to move away from dogma of religion, and my parents have a worldview, and I've shared before about worldviews. Worldviews are hierarchical. They're included and transcended. So you can't really skip a rung in the hierarchy of worldviews. But in my parents' worldview, it was belief that was more important than how you felt, even what you did. You could do some shady shit as long as you believed the right things. And the right things were clearly spelled out in the interpretation of that particular religious institution, church, organization. And so as I began to break away from that, I got a lot of flack from my parents and my family, and even some childhood friends. So I'm no stranger to living in a polarized family, community situation. And then, of course, 2020 shifted the ballgame for so many of us. We found that the alliances of our friends and our family all shifted. So I name that to say that, I'm coming with that, and I'm aware that there is a huge shift underway. And that shift is what is happening right now. We're in the middle of the things that we've been saying are coming. We're actually in the middle of it. Today, I received an email from I'm going to just pull it up and read his first words, from this investor that I follow. His name is James Altucher, and he's a bit of an intellectual. So I like his perspective on things. And he had called a Trump victory. He said, I'm a betting man. And so if I had to bet, I'd be betting on Trump. So what he said today in his email was, last night, America chose disruption over the status quo. I think that right there nails it. So in our spiritual circles, we've been talking about disruption and being disruptors ourselves, and also the change of this era. And I liken it, in astrology, it gives me the best context of Pluto in Capricorn moving into Aquarius, and this idea of the age of Aquarius, and this move toward freedom and decentralization. So there's a couple things to remind us and posit in this conversation as we really try to make sense of what's happening. And I'm not here to say that I know what it is. I'm here to remind us of a few things. And I'm reminding myself, and I think this chaos and this upheaval, this move toward disruption, is going to present each one of us a massive opportunity. And again, if you're not here to listen to that at this moment, then come back and listen when you're open to it, because this is not to bypass any feelings. As I said, I'm coming here in more of a neutral space. And so what I'm present to is the opportunity. I will say that your purpose has not changed. In fact, if anything, it's been amplified. Not because there is anything that we're fighting against, because again, I'm part of the what you resist persists mode, and I'm not fighting against anything. I instead believe that this is an opportunity to become the most expressed, creative version of yourself that in all timelines has ever had the opportunity to be in 3D. That's what I think is the opportunity of this moment. And so if we get into thought forms and we play out thought forms, as I presence from the beginning of my imagination, of this is my preference because this is what I imagine, or this is my preference and this is what I imagine, or I don't want that and because this is what I imagine will happen. And I've heard people all in our social media bubbles talking about what's now going to happen. And the truth is, you don't know. You don't know. And so there, I like to use Byron Katie's work. Is that true? Do you absolutely know that that's true? And how do you feel when you think that thought? Who would you be without that thought? And then turning it around, could the opposite be true or truer? So when I don't have an ego need to hold on to a viewpoint, then I'm going to see opportunities where before I just saw doom and gloom. And at this point in my life, I've had so many of my preferences not granted that I am no stranger to, okay, this is what's appearing now. Another great line from Byron Katie is, this is what's appearing. It's appearing now as this. In Landmark, the words are, this is what's so. This is just what's so. So today we have some contact with reality. We are no longer living in our ideation of what we think should be. We now have contact with what's so. That, for me, even if I don't like it, is fucking liberating. Notice in yourself, when you're through your process, if you land on a liberated state. I remember when I was doing Kundalini yoga and I found out before it had been public what was going on behind the scenes in Kundalini. And I realized that I was going to teach, I was like showing up to teach, but I was doing it from a place of freedom because I realized that the old world, that the world that I had lived inside of as a construct was blown apart. So it led me to freedom. So I want to assure every single one of us that the future holds more freedom. More freedom. It really does. That's my stand. That's who I get to be. And if you want that, if you're willing to receive that, you get that too. The future holds more freedom. The future we're going into has so much more decentralization that it unleashes the social structures. And I'm not talking about who's the president. I'm talking about the future. This Aquarian future, that's the context that I hold it in, but there's probably other ways to talk about it, is decentralized. It's more self-expressive. In fact, it's more diverse. Do you notice that that's already happening? That the polarity that we had in our world in, like, say, the 1940s and 50s, not that we were around, some of us, but we see it in movies, and the polarity, that polarity is even shifting. I think we're moving into less polarity. For better or for worse, it's really going to have consequences all over the place. But we're moving into a place of being on a spectrum of diversity, of many, many ways of doing things. And our old operating systems are going to have to upgrade. And this is what's really challenging in this moment. I've had my phone blow up this morning of people just texting and asking for my context of it. And I don't know that I have all the right words for this, but I think the words I'm pointing to are like, I was following a marketing influencer and he said about marketing that women over 50, and I would be one, are operating, and this is an analogy, are operating under a view of the economy and price points that are 2 inflations ago. And I had to laugh because I remember when I was looking for a place to live a couple of years ago, I was appalled. Remember when prices just, like, they were this and then they were up here, they just soared. I was looking for a place to live in that soar. And my set point of what was an acceptable amount of money to pay per month was not at all the reality of what was being offered. And I remember my intuitive was like, you've got to update your files to what's so. This is what's so. It just is that number now, and you're going to pay it. So I liken that, and I laugh so hard because I am paying it. And I have let go of this shaking of my head. Like, how could it be that I'm literally paying 3 times as much in rent that I was paying, 2 years ago? So that's the analogy of how we're going to have to hop some timelines, because our operating system, our playbook, our world playbook is from an old world. And we're now hopping timelines, and we're going to see this election, this disruptive election, is going to show us a new timeline. And I'm saying this neutrally. I don't think it's better or worse. In fact, all the stuff that we make up about things being better is just delusional. Things are always both. It's everything. And who you be inside of it dictates your experience of it. But shit's going to happen, and then great things are going to happen. So I'm saying it from neutral. I'm going to check in and see if there's any comments so far that I can respond to. But I'll finish that thought that there's a new playbook here. It's a new playbook happening. And I admit, as much as I teach about this evolutionary future, I was still operating in the old playbook. But today I got a glimpse of, oh. And so in hindsight, 4 years from now, and 8 years from now, and 20 years from now, we're going to be able to look back and actually see what we were in the middle of. And today we don't know, because we're in the middle of it. So when we come back to first principles, here we are today in the middle of massive disruptions. This is a disruptor now candidate-elect with a disruptive team on reorganizing the money system, the way we interact with power, organizations, institutions within government, government itself. If that isn't the Aquarian age, I don't know what is. So in so many ways, we've been asking for this. And I know for me, I just didn't like the character in which it was coming through. And that's not to say that it's all going to be pretty and great, but who you get to be inside of it. Who do I get to be? Those are first principles. No one can ever take that away from me. Who I am for myself and who I am for the world, no one can take away. No one can take away my own sense of expression of who I am, of my dharma. And in fact, if I had to put money on it, I'd say that's where I'd put money. That's what's going to grow. That's what's going to expand. And we're going to discover parts of ourselves that we have never known, because we've been inside of a paradigm that's now being broken up. And we're going to get the benefit of that broken up paradigm. And I'm going to use it as a benefit. And the benefit is I'm going to become more of myself, and you're going to become more of yourself. And then collectively, our challenge is, how do we get along as you be you and I be me? And we may find little pieces where we overlap in agreement, and we may find that there's places that we are far apart. And so maybe there's a revolution in our purpose in being together, that our purpose in being together isn't about agreement, and it isn't about agreeing to disagree. It's about something else, maybe our humanity. I was with my dad this weekend, and my dad and I, first of all, my dad was my confidant, in my childhood. He was such an advocate for me and my education and my learning, and he was my safe place to go to. And as I became more self-expressed, let's say more into my own with my own beliefs, and I broke away from the family system of belief, there's been a rift between my dad and I. And I've gotten some feedback from him in the past of who I've been being with him. And I care very deeply, and I know he cares very deeply, but we've certainly locked horns. And mostly I give advice on his health, which he does not like. So fast forward to last weekend, and I got to be with him. I felt it was just so wonderful. And what came through was a lighter, softer way of being, but I was actually more myself. We didn't really talk about content, like things that we would fight over. We were being together. And when I did speak about his health, I spoke about it in a different way. How can I support you? Here's what I know. Let's make a plan. What would you be interested in doing? And it just felt different. And I got a different outcome. We have collaboration happening. So I can tell by that little microcosm and what I'm seeing in my little Facebook bubble is that there is a move. to the both and of how do I be so fully myself and fully self-expressed, and how do I get along with others without compromising that. It's a no compromise zone of who I am. And that requires so much self-awareness, because there's a lot that I am not, that I get to give up trying to be. And I think this disruptive moment, at least for me, allows me the freedom. I can only speak for me, but it allows me the freedom to be even more myself and to embody the type of leadership that comes from my being. It comes from my love. And I'm not going to be a yes to everything. I have my boundaries. I am going to disrupt. I've called a few people out on Facebook who I thought were arrogant and egotistical. And I'm like, you can do better. So I'm going to be that person until I'm not, until I receive feedback that it's not landing and I shift and change. I guess the point of that is to be willing to shift and change, to be willing to show up and receive feedback, to be willing to be yourself and to be in relationship with others. There's hard things we sometimes have to share with people. There's hard things we sometimes have to receive from other people. It is not just love and light. It's both and. So that's what I want to share on this day. If that gives you a way forward to fully be in your lane as you, confident that the world's going to want more of who you are, stripped of your defensiveness, stripped of your ego, stripped of your attitude. And when those come in, the world will give you feedback and you get to say, whoops, yep, thanks for that. And recalibrate. So many of us are in a recalibration mode because you can feel as the tectonic plates shift, those deep plates underneath our metaphorical feet. New things are required. The stuff that we were doing, maybe, yeah, it's integrated in us, and now we want to take it in a different direction. Today in Creators Academy, I asked the question, who is in the middle of a reorganization, of an internal revolution? And almost everyone raised their hand. So there might be something bigger afoot. That's what I'm holding for. That's where my drishti, my third eye gaze is on. All right, so I'm going to tune in here on my phone and just see if there's anything to say. Oh, okay, Katya's here. Wonderful. And Maria, shedding what we're not. Yeah, I share my voice from the heart. We don't know, and it's okay not to know. Thanks, Claudia. Katya, my purpose is still to turn poison into medicine and cultivate and disseminate virtue and embodied wisdom. Yes, yes. Marilyn, thank you. Feeling grateful for my courage. Thank you. Feeling grateful that you're here. Shirley, looking forward to feeling more neutral. Yeah, right now what I'm feeling is quite painful. I get that. I think it's all included. I had a spiritual experience on the 15th of September that honestly showed me the 800 flavors of neutral. And it was glorious. It felt sublime. And what I realized is that at this level of that we're playing humanity right now, we have these certain emotions, and that there's so much more that we will experience as we evolve. And again, it's all included and transcended. These are steps that we're taking. So feeling everything, becoming more human, becoming more messy, but also opening our heart more, being willing to be wrong, being willing to not know. Those are the beautiful aspects of humanity. So thank you for being here. Claire Dash is here. Oh, thank you, sister. Claire Dash is going to be inside of the membership on Sunday doing parts work. If you're feeling that you'd want to talk to yourself and you want some witness talking to yourself, and by that I mean your parts, come join us inside the membership Sunday at 9 a.m. Pacific. Claire's an expert. She holds impeccable space, and she will support you in having the conversations with yourself to really understand the nature and character of that grief. It probably wants to say some things to you personally. Kim Wallace is here. I love you, sister. Thank you for the calibration talk. Yep. Higher perspective, points to grow with. Deb Myers is here. Welcome, sister. Yeah, we have a lot to say. This is not a conversation that's going away. This is the core of my work. I believe that we're all called to leadership. I believe that while the world is reorganizing itself, the United States in particular, while things are going to get blown apart, agencies in the government, our economics, all the things, let's, as feminine leaders, weave ourselves into the nooks and crannies so that our influence of this consciousness that we're speaking about, of our hearts that know that defensive ways of being are things of the past that we can shed, that we can really embrace our humanity and make fun of ourselves and laugh at ourselves and be with each other in our uniqueness, in our diversity. Like, that's the medicine that we get to bring in many different ways. Each of you, and I know some of you so well, you have your medicine that you're here to bring. And so let's infiltrate these nooks and crannies as spaces made for us. And just like the divine feminine has always done, she rises when the time is right. And she fills the space just by her presence and by her beingness. This is an exciting time if you're willing and open to allow it to be such, because it means the flourishing of you and your gifts and your dharma. And that's what I'm going to stand for. That's what I'll keep talking about. That's what we will collectively talk about. We'll know more as time goes on. We'll feel more. We'll get present to, okay, my work has shifted. This is now what I'm here to do. We'll start stepping into it. And in the Creators Academy, we're going to support you to do that. There are ways these things want to come through you. So join us in any place that you feel called if you want and need the support. And otherwise, let's have these conversations more often so that we can weave together a new narrative, one of possibility for who we get to be in this chaotic, fucked up, amazing, beautiful, wild, devastating world. So let's rub our hands together, taking everything that we have said, throwing out anything that doesn't need to be there, and just turning it into liquid light and love as we beam it out to the world. I love to say the prayer, gathering all the positive energy we have generated. May all beings benefit from the merits of our efforts. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Sending you lots of love.